Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all to those who've joined us online. My name's Mark McGurran, and I'm the Global Managing Director for Maritime here at ABL. Welcome to September 2024's Maritime Market Briefing, where today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity in maritime. And following that, in place of our usual case reports, we're doing a dedicated case report on an update on the Red Sea and what's going on there at the moment. Our briefing is accredited by the Chartered Insurance Institute, and delegates could claim up to 1 CPD hour for your participation. We will therefore keep a record of those of you in the room today and those of you logging on online. If you've already done so, please sign in with the team on the front desk after the briefing so we can make sure we follow up with this. And just a quick reminder today, we will be ending the webinar portion of the briefing after the technical presentation, and the update on the Red Sea will be delivered in the room only to the in-person attendees. Obviously, it's quite a sensitive topic. Of course, we are happy to discuss with anyone who would like more information on the topic after the briefing, so please do get in touch. I'm delighted to introduce our technical presenters today. Chris Cox, who is ABL's Maritime Electronic Data Analyst. Chris is based in London, and he'll be presenting today on the topic of cybersecurity in maritime, the risks and the safeguards. And following that, for the second part of today's briefing, to present the update on the Red Sea, we have Christos Drotos. Christos is a senior surveyor, and he's based in our Dubai office, and he's visiting us here this week. Christos has first-hand experience in the matter, having attended several of the missile and drone strikes that we've dealt with in the area. Please note the usual caveats apply, Chatham House rules apply, and remember that the information contained in today's presentation and any opinions or comments expressed are those of the presenters and not necessarily those of ABL. At the end of today's briefing, can we please ask everyone to take some time out of their day to complete the online survey? This is crucial for us to keep our CPD accreditation and allows us to continue to offer you the points for the briefing. It also means we can look on how we can improve the briefings and match your requirements and needs. And we're also always open to suggestions on topics if there's anything that you might want to hear about. So please use the QR code on the screen. It's also displayed outside where you can download the survey. And we'll also probably follow up with an email afterwards if you miss it. Before we begin, we bring this up every month. It's very important to what we do at ABL. ABL is very proud to be a signatory to the Neptune Declaration on Seafarer Wellbeing and Crew Change. This declaration has helped enormously in the past few years since COVID in contributing to the improvements of the lives of seafarers. Many of us here at ABL are ex-seafarers, so it's a cause very close to our hearts. If you do have the opportunity to perhaps look at it on behalf of your companies and get your companies to sign up, that would be greatly appreciated. And I'm now going to hand over to Chris for his part of the briefing.
Hello. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction, and good to see so many people here in the room, and hello to everyone online as well. So today I'll be talking about cybersecurity in maritime, the risk and the safeguards, and then more specifically about AIS spoofing and manipulation. So what you'll learn today, you'll gain a bit of a background on the multitude of systems on board vessels. You'll learn about the cybersecurity risks associated with ships and ports. You'll understand the safeguards and procedures which can be put in place to help detect and mitigate these risks. And then you will learn about AIS spoofing, the methods used to achieve it, and how it can be detected. So firstly, a bit of background about myself. I have been with ABL for getting on for 5 years now, unbelievably. First 2 years of those I was in Singapore, and ever since then I've been working in the London office. I work as a maritime electronic data analyst and have a background in software engineering with a degree from the University of Southampton. And then since then I've had 16 years of experience writing software and analyzing maritime data. And the key applications for this work has been incident reconstruction and investigation, vessel performance and safety monitoring, and then more recently, emissions tracking. So, what is a cyber attack or hacking? Simply put, it's the authorized gaining of access to data or a system in an attempt to damage it, steal data, or to cause destruction. So why would the maritime industry be a good target for cyber hackers? Well, obviously, because of the high value assets, they are particularly high value targets. And in the age we're living in cyber warfare, there's massive political gain that can be gained from maritime cyber attacks. Big financial rewards, especially in ransoms for ransomware. So on average, ship owners will pay approximately $3.1 million in a ransom per single hack that is successful. There's the opportunity to capture these expensive assets. So cargo, even ships conceivably could be captured through this method. There's the opportunity to disrupt operations, which will obviously have huge financial and logistical impacts as well. Access to sensitive data, cargo manifests, confidential crew data, all kinds of other bits of data as well. And then it can also be used to assist in other criminal activity, such as smuggling, which I'll show an example of in a little bit. So looking at a ship, there's some of the onboard systems that there are. And I like to think of it as a system of systems. So it's one ship built up of many different systems doing all different jobs. Some are interconnected, some work independently. So just some examples there. You've got things like the crew network, navigation systems, GPS, AIS, ECDIS charting systems, engine control and management systems, power management systems, cargo handling, communication systems, integrated bridge, VDRs, fire detection, water and waste management systems, and all of these are potential entry points for a hack to occur. And as we go further into the future and more automation comes in and more complex integrated systems are introduced, this will only create more possible entry points. And likewise, with ports, again, another system of systems. You have things like the on-site offices, IT systems, computer systems, networks. You have the off-site servers. You have SCADA systems, so supervisory control and data acquisition systems. So these monitor some of the cargo handling equipment, fuel bunkering systems. PLC systems, programmable logic control systems. So these will perform automated tasks based on logical inputs, such as automated stacking gantries, power management, and then physical access controls like the gate access you see there, equipment control systems, and like the ship, the navigational systems like VTS and AIS. So lots of possible entry points, lots of potential gateways for an attack. So what are some of the attacks that could take place? So specifically for maritime, GPS interference and AIS spoofing, GPS jamming, things like that. AIS spoofing I'll come on to in the second half of the presentation in more detail. You'll recognize some of these other ones. So phishing attacks, very common, the most common form of cyber attacks these days. An estimated 3.4 billion phishing emails get sent every single day. So these are the ones where Bob from accounting will get an email asking him to go to a link and enter his bank details to log in and check something, not realizing this is a fake bank website. He types his details in and loses all his money. But then there's also QR code phishing. So fake QR codes in place of where genuine ones should be to take people to illegitimate websites. Social engineering, which is where a more direct approach is taken to kind of try and access someone's personal data from them, perhaps over the phone even. And then malware, so viruses, Trojan horses. So this is software that could either cause damage itself or give hackers more access to your system, such as remote access to then go in and do what they want. Ransomware, encrypting hard drives or entire servers and essentially locking you out of your data until you pay a ransom. And because you're not dealing with the most legitimate people, even if you paid a ransom, there's no guarantee you're actually going to get your data back. DDoS attacks. So this is distributed denial of service attacks. So this is where a huge number of requests are made to a server or a website in order to overload it and bring it down. This can either be malicious or it could actually happen naturally. So if millions of people want to buy Oasis tickets, they all go to the ticket website and they can potentially bring it down if the servers aren't built to handle all the requests. SQL injection is quite a classic form of hacking. So this is inputting code into a website form where it shouldn't be, and then using that to either delete, steal data from the underlying database underneath the website. And then man-in-the-middle attacks. So if Bob from accounting is now trying to pay an invoice, so a hacker could sit in the middle of those conversations, those communications between him and who he's speaking to, wait for the opportunity to jump in, pretend to be the other party, and send Bob to the wrong website again to make a payment, so that again, poor Bob has lost his money. So here's a few examples of hacks within the maritime industry. You'll notice there's a lot of ransomware ones there, and you'll also notice that they cost a lot of money. So in terms of commercial impacts, hundreds of millions potentially. And ransomware has gone up in frequency in recent years. You'll see the top one there in terms of specific forms of ransomware, Lockbit 3.0. This is currently one of the most prevalent ones out there, and that's partly due to its complexity, but also because it's run as ransomware as a service. So this has led to a high frequency of attacks because all the hackers work together and then share the ransoms amongst each other. So a more specific example of a hack is the Port of Antwerp in Belgium. So between 2011 and 2013, this went on. So a very long-term hack. So this is obviously one of Europe's largest and busiest ports. And this hack was conducted by a criminal organization with the express purpose of facilitating their drug smuggling. So the criminals gained access to the port's IT system through the use of malware. And then it was then possible for them to alter container tracking data to identify the containers in which their drugs were being held, and also to change information about them if they wanted them to appear more inconspicuous, and then also to redirect them to locations from which they could then retrieve the drugs. So this went on for a couple of years before the port authorities and the container owners started to notice discrepancies between logistics and tracking data, and then it was eventually uncovered. But this was a big wake-up call for ports in terms of the threat that's out there. So what can we do to start to fight against this and mitigate the risks? So you'll see a bunch of bubbles there, which make up the full kind of processes you need to go through in order to fight cyber attacks. And these can basically be broken down into 6 areas. So govern, identify, protect, detect, response, and recover. Whoops. Well, that's fine. I was going on the next slide anyway. So breaking those down into more detail. So proper governance of procedures is a key aspect of ensuring complete planning is in place and has been communicated to all relevant stakeholders. So this is having a comprehensive cybersecurity policy in place with details of roles, responsibilities, and the cybersecurity measures included, training policies for all your staff, and then compliance to all legal and regulatory requirements should be ensured in this stage. Identification. So this is identifying all the assets that exist and all the possible threats that therefore exist. So, regular assessments should be undertaken to make sure that this inventory of assets is up to date. And this includes hardware, firmware, software. Network topology maps should be created so you can see how your systems interact with each other. All the possible remote connections that are used in your control systems should be highlighted so that you know all the possible ways in. And the reason for doing this is that you can't fully secure your house from a break-in if you have 3 sets of keys and you only know where 2 of them are, or you don't know where all the entry points into your house are. You have to know this in order to put up the relevant protections. Which brings me on to protection. So appropriate actions have to be made to protect these assets from cyber attacks. So this is software and hardware tools like firewalls, access rights as well for staff, so that only people who should have access to particular systems have it. The processes for detection and analysis of cyber events to understand attack targets and methods. So cyber attack attempts actually occur constantly. So every server will always have automated traffic coming at it and trying to break in. And so these attacks should be analyzed to see where they're coming from, what they're targeting, so you can identify where your weak points potentially are. And then your response, so policies, training and plans to respond to cybersecurity incidents. So many in here probably don't know your company's response procedure to cybersecurity, but I guarantee they exist, and your IT departments will know these. And the purpose of having these is to limit the impact of them, to minimize the damages, to stop the spread throughout your networks and your systems, and to essentially bring the risk as low as possible. And then finally, recovery. So disaster recovery plans and backup systems need to be in place to minimize these impacts and data loss. And estimates say that it takes roughly 4 weeks to fully recover from a serious cybersecurity attack. And so you kind of need contingencies in place to be able to continue your business during that time period to minimize the business interruption that you experience. Some more specific actions that you can take to minimize cybersecurity risks. So I've just listed some there: firewalls to block traffic, antivirus installation and maintenance. You have to keep your antivirus up to date because viruses will constantly evolve in a kind of race. Network isolation, so separating key systems from general local networks. So on a ship, your crew network doesn't want to be linked to the key operational technology that controls the engines of the ship. That's just asking for trouble. Training for staff to help detect possible malware or phishing attacks. Tell Bob in accounting to stop clicking those emails. And no matter how robust the software and hardware protections you put in place, humans will always be the weakest point in that system. So you cannot overstate the training aspect of it. Regular offsite backups need to be made so that if you experience a ransomware attack, instead of paying that ransom to get your data back, you already have it elsewhere in an offsite separate backup that you can just pull down and return to business as usual. Automated email filtering, stop all those phishing emails coming in. Obtaining cybersecurity insurance to, again, minimize the financial losses. Two-factor authentication, so when you sign in, get a code on your phone just to confirm you are who you say you are. And then VPNs to encrypt your digital traffic. And then finally, on cybersecurity, what are the regulations that ships have to adhere to? So from the 1st of July this year, all new builds over 500 gross tons for cargo vessels and all international passenger vessels have to adhere to the International Association of Classification Societies new regulations. And these state that compliance must be shown throughout the 3 stages of design and construction, commissioning, and operation of the vessel. So specific requirements inside this include vessel asset inventories, cyber resilience testing, penetration testing, things like that, policies for ongoing cyber resilience measures being taken as well. So essentially, a lot of the stuff that I've just spoken about now is applicable to all new build vessels. But currently, similar regulations don't exist for ports, but a responsible port should be taking similar actions on their own back anyway. The IMO do have guidelines for risk management in cybersecurity to help with this, but also you can get third-party cybersecurity audits and also certifications like the UK Cyber Essentials certificate can help you have the confidence that your port is cyber secure. All right, moving on to a more specific form of maritime cybersecurity, AIS spoofing. So you might have all heard of this, but what is it exactly? So AIS, Automatic Information System, the name doesn't really tell you much, but it's used to periodically broadcast every vessel's positional information, vessel details, voyage information, etc., to nearby vessels and land-based authorities. And this is a key tool in collision avoidance with systems such as closest point of approach, warning the bridge team if they are going to collide in 10 minutes or so with another vessel so they can take actions ahead of time. And AIS spoofing involves either the transmission of falsified AIS data to confuse other traffic or to create non-existent vessels or ghost ships to appear on their AIS transponders, disguise the true movements of a vessel undergoing illicit activities, such as breaking sanctions or smuggling as well. So the picture you see there is an example of a vast amount of false AIS traffic being created to confuse the operators of an active system. So how does it work? How do people actually do it? So there's multiple ways you can do it. The simplest way, just switch your transponder off and then none of the traffic around you can see where you are. This is known as going dark, and it's the simplest way to hide your activities from authorities. But that also does make it quite easy to detect as well, which some of the examples later on will show. You can broadcast false vessel particulars. So essentially change your name, change your MMSI number, and then when you're smuggling oil to a country you perhaps shouldn't be, it appears to be another vessel doing the dirty work. And then location manipulation, a little bit more complex, but this is where you actually use software to generate false AIS tracks and GPS positions, which are then transmitted over your AIS. So all the ships in the area think that you are somewhere where you're actually not. And this can be done on a laptop with software and then produce false sentences, plug it into your AIS transponder, and away you go. So a few high-profile examples. All this information is just from news stories that are out there. So a few years ago, the Grace 1, which then changed its name to the Adrian-Daya 1, and then again changed its name to the Armand 114. This was a Panamanian flagged vessel carrying approx 2.1 million barrels of oil. It gained interest of the authorities after it kept going dark in 2018. And then it was eventually detained by British authorities in Gibraltar after being suspected of attempting to transfer this oil to Syria, who were, of course, under sanctions at the time. In response, Iran seized a British flag vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. And then after release from Gibraltar and being told, don't take that oil to Syria, the vessel changed its name. It went under an Iranian flag, and the AIS transponder was switched off in the Mediterranean. And then following that, satellite imagery appeared to show the vessel eventually off the port of Tartus in Syria. And then another case, MT Courageous, this is a Cambodian flagged vessel. This was seized by the United States in March 2020 while it was docked in Cambodia. And this is because it was suspected of smuggling oil to North Korea through ship-to-ship transfers. And it apparently turned off its AIS frequently during these operations and was also suspected of broadcasting false positions as well to cover up his actions. And then for ports as well, ports can be victims of AIS spoofing too. So ports of Shanghai and Ningbo Zhoushan in 2019, these both experienced some kind of AIS manipulation attack. So vessels in the area claimed that their transponders were showing their own vessels in incorrect locations, and also other vessels moving in circular patterns when actually they were stationary or moving in a straight line. And the true reason for this was never uncovered, or at least never released by the Chinese government, but theory suggests that it could have been electronic warfare techniques being tested or deployed, or a cyber attack. So how can we detect when this is going on? Because clearly it has massive safety issues, and we want to know if this is happening around us. So detecting it on a historical basis is actually pretty easy. So data gaps when a vessel goes dark, very easy to identify, especially if it's commonly happening in a common location where perhaps ship-to-ship transfers are suspected of taking place. But also if it's in an area of very good AIS coverage and suddenly your vessel disappears, that's a little bit suspect. Broadcasting incorrect vessel information is also fairly easy to spot in historical data. Example I've seen is a vessel sailing along, suddenly stopping, going dark, and then an hour or so later, another vessel appears exactly where it was, but with a different name, different MMSI. So they've changed their details essentially. And then your ghost ships, the artificial tracks I was talking about, these are also possible to identify. So looking at the example there, you can see that over those 20 minutes or so, the speed, heading, and course haven't changed. Any mariner will tell you this is impossible because even on the calmer seas, there's no vessel that can carry on at this kind of steady speed and heading. And then there's also other things that might identify it, large jumps in position where they start transponding fake information. I've even seen cases where a vessel will broadcast the same false track multiple times. So you'll see it undergo the exact same track that it did a few days before because they're using the same fake data. But that's all well and good, but what about live detection? Because you guys on the ships, you need to know if there are risks there. You need to know if there are vessels around you broadcasting fake data because of the increased chances of collision. So there are some techniques which are starting to exist for doing this. So AIS is transponded over VHF, and so this has RF signals associated with it. So a receiver could look at those RF signals and use that, using the Doppler effect, I believe, to pinpoint where that was broadcasted from. And then that position can be compared to the GPS position being broadcasted in the sentence to then see if that is a legitimate position that's being broadcasted. But this isn't widely used yet in the industry. And so until technological advances occur, then this is going to remain to be a problem. And so for bridge teams, the advice would be to don't rely just on your AIS. Obviously, you have a multitude of systems. You have your radar, your ECDIS, and the mariners I work with will always say there's nothing better than just looking out the window to see what's around you. So in conclusion, cybersecurity breaches in maritime can cause losses of hundreds of millions and should be taken very seriously. There's reputation damage and also the high impacts on supply line logistics. Proactive steps need to be taken for both vessels and ports in the 6 key areas. So those were govern, identify, protect, detect, response, and recovery. AIS spoofing likely to remain a threat until technological advancements are made throughout the sector. Obviously, with the way things are in the world at the moment, sanctions busting is a big thing going on with Russian oil, Iranian oil, etc. And so building cyber resilience will only become more important as more autonomy, more complex systems are introduced in the future. So that is everything from me. Do we have any questions, either in the room or online? Sorry, can you repeat that? Couldn't quite hear you. Electronic what? Sorry, Mark. Bills of lading. Okay. Yeah. So the question was in regards to hacking of bills of lading and what protections can be put in place for those. Essentially, your biggest protection there will be access, preventing access to those. So they should be stored on systems which are perhaps separate from general networks. Only people who need access to those should be given access rights, and then the appropriate protections on those accounts or user accounts or whatever to get in there, two-factor authentication, encryption, all that kind of thing, VPNs as well. That will be your strongest protection there. Thank you. Any more in the room? Or do we have any online?
So the first question online is from Mr. Richard Ford. Any advice on hardening security posture in SCADA and engine management systems? Okay.
Hi, Richard. Good to hear from you. So SCADA systems, again, isolation, network isolation. They generally do not need to be on the same networks that communicate with the outside world. So preventing access from the outside is the strongest protection you can put in for a SCADA system, and essentially separating them from the more IT systems that you have in place. Any more?
So for the next question from an anonymous attendee, is the use of USB still common on board vessels, and does there exist a technique to protect systems such as scrubbing of USBs?
Yeah, USBs are still used on board. I know when I've received VDR data recordings from a USB stick that's been on a ship, the first thing I do is put on write protection, so that the USB stick cannot write to my computer. So you can put in hardware blockers to stop that happening. And also likewise, you can apply that to the systems on the ship, so that if a USB stick, which has been passed around the bridge team maybe, and they've stuck it in their laptops, malware could get on it, and then you plug it into a system on the ship, that could cause an issue. So systems on the ship should have write protections to prevent anything from a non-trusted source getting onto their systems.
One more from Spiro Pajos. Does the Coast Guard have access to AAS data?
Yes. Yeah, they do. All right. If there's no more in the room, I will thank you. Oh, sorry. What sort of training? They should be, yeah, thank you. So the question was, what sort of training do the ship teams get for cybersecurity? So they should be getting the sort of training of preventing phishing attacks. So the same sort of training that everyone else gets with companies. But also, like I was saying about USB sticks, improper use of those, plugging them into systems that they shouldn't be plugged into, and things like that. That's the training they should be getting. And then they should be getting training on what to do if a cybersecurity attack does happen, and how they should respond, who they should report it to, what other steps should be taken. Thank you. Okay. In that case, I will pass back to Mark.
Thank you, Chris. Very interesting, very informative. There's a recap here of our learning objectives for today. And this concludes this month's ABL Maritime Market Briefing for those of you who joined online. Our next market briefing will be held online and in person on the 10th of October on the topic of safe mooring. So thank you for joining online, and we hope to see you soon.